The sound of heels echoed across the marble floor of Vale Industries as Emma Carter stood frozen in front of the entire staff. Her boss, Richard Vale, a billionaire known for his flawless suits and colder eyes, slammed a folder onto the glass table. "You stole from me," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through silence. Every gaze in the office turned toward her. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears as Richard held up a printed bank statement. $200,000. Gone. Your signature is on it. Emma shook her head, words stumbling out of her throat. That's impossible. I would never... But Richard didn't let her finish. He gestured to security with a single flick of his hand. Pack her things. She's finished. The guards moved in, their polished shoes clicking like a metronome of doom. Emma's chest tightened as humiliation burned through her veins. In 12 years of loyalty, she had never even taken an extra pencil home. Her trembling hands gathered her belongings, a family photo, a broken pen, a small notebook of dreams she never told anyone about. As she reached the elevator, the whispers started. Did she really do it? You never know with people like that. The metal doors closed on her reflection, tear-streaked, pale and disbelieving. Inside, she could still hear Richard's final words echoing down the hall. Thieves don't belong in my company. And right there, watching from the corner of the room, stood Liam Vale, Richard's son. His face was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, a mixture of guilt and doubt. As the elevator descended, he exhaled sharply, the truth pressing heavy against his chest. He knew his father could be cruel, but this felt wrong. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? Imagine losing everything in a single moment, not because of what you did, but because someone... A powerful decided your truth didn't matter. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if you were in Emma's place? Because what happened next changed everything. 3 days before that public humiliation, Emma had been the heartbeat of the company. The first to arrive, the last to leave. She knew every schedule, every contract, every tiny detail that kept the empire running. Her desk sat by the window, overlooking the city, sunlight catching the edge of her coffee mug each morning. She believed in hard work, in honesty, values that seemed to fade the higher you climbed in Vale's world. Richard, her boss, had once trusted her completely. He'd even called her his right hand. But lately something had shifted. He'd grown distant, snapping at minor mistakes, demanding files at midnight. The weight of pressure from investors and the media had turned him restless. He needed someone to blame when numbers didn't add up, and Emma was the easiest target. That week, the atmosphere in the office had changed. Whispers replaced greetings, eyes lingered a bit too long. Emma noticed her computer freezing, files missing, signatures she didn't remember authorizing. When she mentioned it to IT, they brushed her off. Probably a glitch. She shrugged it off too, never imagining it was the start of her downfall. On the morning of the accusation, she had brought Richard his coffee. 2 sugars, no cream, just how he liked it. He hadn't looked up when she placed it on his desk. His phone buzzed, and his tone darkened. "We'll handle it," he said to whoever was on the line. Then, without warning, he turned toward her, eyes blazing with betrayal. "Emma, explain this," he demanded, shoving the report that would destroy her life. Her world shattered before she even understood what was happening. And as she stood there, heart pounding, her only thought was why? Why would a man she'd devoted her life to believe such a lie? The answer, though hidden, was already moving, quietly, dangerously, through the shadows of Vale Industries. And in those shadows, someone was smiling. The rain hadn't stopped since the day Emma lost her job. It slid down the cracked window of her small apartment, turning the world outside into streaks of grey. She sat on her couch, clutching a half-empty mug of cold coffee, her mind replaying Richard's voice over and over. Every "you stole from me" echoed like thunder. Around her, stacks of unpaid bills lay scattered, silent reminders of a life built on loyalty and shattered in seconds. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from a former co-worker. "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't get involved." She stared at the words until they blurred. The office group chat had gone silent the moment she was fired. People who once smiled at her now avoided even liking her posts. Reputation, she realized, was fragile. Once broken, it cut both ways. She turned on the TV for company, but her own face appeared on the screen. "Billionaire accuses longtime secretary of theft," the anchor said, smiling, like it was entertainment. Emma's stomach twisted. They used her photo from a company event, the one where she'd been laughing, carefree. Now that same image painted her as a criminal. She switched off the TV and sat in the quiet hum of rain and heartbreak. Her mother had called earlier, crying, begging her to tell the truth. "Mom, I am telling the truth," she had said, voice trembling. But even her mother's tone carried doubt. Betrayal wasn't just losing a job, it was losing the world's faith in who you were. When night fell, Emma walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and stared at the company documents she'd saved over the years. She wasn't even sure why she'd kept them. Habit, maybe, or some deep sense of responsibility. As she scrolled, a strange detail caught her eye. A payment authorization she'd never seen, dated 2 weeks before the accusation. Her signature was there, but she hadn't signed it. A chill crept up her spine. She zoomed in. The signature looked perfect. Too perfect. Her name curved in flawless imitation. Someone had forged it. Her heart began to race. If this document was falsified, there had to be more. She grabbed a notebook, scribbling names and dates, connecting dots in desperation. The pattern was just beginning to emerge when her phone vibrated again. This time, the message wasn't from a friend. "Stop digging. You'll only make things worse." No name, no number, just a warning. Emma stared at it, the screen's glow reflecting in her wide, frightened eyes. For the first time, fear mixed with anger. Someone wanted her silent, and that meant she was closer to the truth than she realized. The next morning, she took the subway downtown, coat-soaked, eyes hollow. She went to a lawyer's office, hoping someone would listen, but the man behind the desk only glanced at her folder before saying, "Without money, there's nothing I can do." His pity felt worse than his rejection. As she stepped back into the cold, she whispered to herself, "Then I'll fight alone." That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling both defeated and defiant. The city lights flickered through the blinds like distant stars. Somewhere in that vast skyline, Richard Vale was sipping expensive whiskey, believing he had won. But beneath her grief, something was changing inside Emma, something sharp, resilient, and quietly dangerous. And as she fell asleep to the rhythm of the rain, one thought anchored her fading strength. The truth doesn't die just because someone buries it. 2 days passed before Emma gathered the courage to leave her apartment again. The city looked colder now, not because of the weather, but because she saw it differently. Every stranger's glance felt like judgment, every reflection a reminder of the label she couldn't shake: thief. She walked into a small cafe she used to visit with colleagues, hoping the familiar smell of coffee might ground her. But when she looked around, she noticed only empty tables. No one wanted to be seen with her anymore. That's when she saw Grace. Sitting near the window, nervously stirring her drink, Grace looked like someone who'd been waiting, but wasn't sure she should be there. Emma approached hesitantly. "Grace." The woman jumped slightly, eyes darting around. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "People are watching." Her tone was sharp, but her hands trembled. Emma sat anyway, lowering her voice. "I need to know the truth. Please." Grace sighed and leaned in. "You didn't take that money, Emma. Everyone knows it. But the higher-ups, they needed someone to blame. Something big went wrong in the accounts, and if it reached the board, the whole company could crash." Her words hit like cold water. Emma gripped the edge of the table. "Then who did it?" Grace hesitated, eyes flicking toward the door. "I can't say, but I brought something you should see." From her purse, Grace pulled out a small USB drive wrapped in a tissue. "Keep it safe. Don't open it where anyone can see. There's a file that was deleted from the system, a transaction log. You might find your answers there." Her voice shook as she slid it across the table. "If Vale finds out I gave this to you, I'll lose everything." Emma stared at the object resting between them. It looked harmless, just a piece of plastic, yet it pulsed with danger. She slipped it into her pocket and nodded. "Thank you, Grace." But Grace didn't smile. "Don't thank me, just be careful. People who cross Richard Vale don't stay standing for long." Then she gathered her things and hurried out into the rain, leaving Emma alone with a trembling heart and too many questions. Back home, Emma shut all the curtains and plugged in the drive. Her laptop whirred to life, the screen flickering with lines of coded data. She opened the main file, Accounts, Internal, Confidential, XLSX. Her breath caught. Dozens of payments, hidden under fake vendor names, transferred directly to offshore accounts, and each one signed off under her authorization. Her pulse quickened. "Someone built this trap," she whispered. The evidence was right there, but it wasn't enough to prove who had done it. She dug deeper, scrolling through the metadata, timestamps, login IDs, digital fingerprints. Then, at the very bottom of the file, she saw something strange, modified by T. Kane. The name sounded familiar. Thomas Kane, the company's CFO, a man known for his arrogance and his loyalty to Richard. Emma remembered how he used to avoid her eyes, how his smile never reached his face. She'd always sensed something unsettling about him. Now that instinct returned like an echo she had ignored for too long. She saved the files to a hidden folder and unplugged the USB just as her lights flickered. A loud crack of thunder made her flinch, and for a split second she thought she saw movement outside her window. The streetlight illuminated nothing but rain, but her heart raced anyway. She told herself it was paranoia, yet as she sat in the dim glow of her laptop, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, already knew she had that drive. She looked down at her trembling hands and whispered, "I'm not the only one being watched." And outside, across the street, a black car idled, engine running, headlights off. The next morning, Emma couldn't stop staring at the USB drive on her table. It looked ordinary, almost innocent, yet it carried enough truth to burn down an empire. Sleep had barely touched her. Fear and adrenaline had danced through the night like shadows. As dawn spilled across her curtains, one thought crystallized. Richard Vale has to see this. No more silence, no more hiding. She dressed in her old office attire, wrinkled but still sharp enough to remind her who she used to be. The subway ride to Vale Industries felt endless. Every stop was a heartbeat, every announcement a memory of what she'd lost. When she reached the skyscraper, the guards recognized her immediately. "Miss Carter, you can't be here," one said, hand on his radio. Emma's voice didn't tremble this time. "Then call Richard Vale. Tell him I'm here to prove my innocence." Before the guard could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Let her in." It was Liam Vale. He stood near the lobby entrance, dressed in casual clothes that didn't match the sharp world of his father's empire. The guards exchanged uncertain glances, then stepped aside. Emma's eyes met Liam's for a moment. Silent, cautious gratitude, before she followed him toward the elevator. Inside, the metallic hum filled the silence. Liam finally spoke. "You shouldn't have come back here." He's furious. Emma clutched the USB in her hand. "I don't care. I have proof, Liam, proof that someone forged my signature." His brow furrowed. "Proof?" She nodded. "You can't let him destroy me without seeing it." The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and the air seemed to freeze. Richard Vale's office was a cathedral of glass and arrogance. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a trophy. Richard stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, voice controlled and cold. When he saw Emma, his expression didn't shift. It hardened. "I thought I made myself clear." He hung up and crossed his arms. "You have nerve walking in here." Emma stepped forward, placing the USB on his desk. "This drive contains evidence that I was framed. Look at it. Please." Richard glanced down, then gave a short, humorless laugh. "Evidence? You mean whatever files you've tampered with to save yourself?" His tone dripped disdain. "You really think I'll waste time on your lies?" His words were sharp, but his eyes flickered, just for a second, with something else. "Dad, maybe we should..." "Enough!" Richard snapped, shifted uncomfortably. He turned to Emma again. "Get out before I call security." Emma's hands tightened into fists. "You're making a mistake. The truth always surfaces, Mr. Vale, even in your world." Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "In my world, truth is what I say it is." The air between them cracked with unspoken rage. Liam watched the scene unfold, guilt knotting in his stomach. He wanted to defend her, to demand his father at least listen, but years of living under Richard's dominance had carved hesitation deep into his bones. As Emma turned to leave, Liam caught her sleeve gently. "I believe you," he whispered. Her eyes glistened, a fragile spark in a room built on power and lies. When she left the office, Richard stood by the window, staring at his reflection. For a long moment, his confident mask slipped. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk before he picked up the phone. "Kane," he said quietly, "we might have a problem." The line crackled with a reply Emma would never hear. Down in the lobby, Emma walked out into the sunlight that no longer felt warm. She had risked everything and gained nothing, or so it seemed. But in her pocket, Liam had secretly slipped a folded note before she left. 3 words, written in shaky handwriting: "I'll find proof." The envelope arrived on a grey Thursday morning, slipped under Emma's door like an omen. She picked it up, still half asleep, and tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter bearing the golden crest of Vale Industries' legal department. Her heart sank as she read the words. "Notice of defamation suit. Plaintiff, Richard Vale." He wasn't done destroying her reputation. Now he wanted to destroy her completely. For several minutes, she couldn't move. The paper slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. It felt like standing in the middle of a storm with nowhere to hide. A defamation lawsuit meant court, lawyers, and fees she couldn't afford. She could barely pay rent. But worse than that, it meant Richard still had power over her name. Her silence had become his victory, and that thought made her chest burn with anger. She spent that day calling law offices one after another, explaining her situation in shaky sentences. Most hung up after hearing the name Vale. One lawyer, kinder. Then the rest sighed and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Carter. You're up against one of the most influential men in the state. Without funds or hard evidence, no one will take this case." She thanked him anyway, her voice breaking on the word thank. That night, she sat at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of documents and old payslips, trying to make sense of it all. Each paper told a story. 12 years of loyalty, now reduced to ashes. She didn't have a legal team or money, but she had something Richard didn't: truth, and she wasn't about to let it die quietly. She grabbed a notebook and began outlining her own defense. The courthouse loomed over her days later like a fortress of glass and marble. Emma stood at its steps, clutching a worn folder to her chest. Cameras lined the walkway, flashes sparking like lightning. A reporter shouted, "Miss Carter, do you have any comment on Mr. Vale's accusations?" She kept walking, eyes fixed on the tall wooden doors ahead. Silence was her only weapon now. Inside, the world felt heavy with judgment. The air smelled of paper, polish, and power. Emma sat at the defendant's table alone, no attorney, no ally. Across from her, Richard Vale leaned back in his chair, immaculate as ever, his legal team whispering around him like vultures. He didn't look at her once. That hurt more than the accusations themselves. It was as if she no longer existed. The hearing began. The judge's tone was formal. Emma did her best to speak clearly, to explain she had been framed, but her voice trembled against the polished confidence of Richard's lawyers. They called her disgruntled, untrustworthy, a desperate woman seeking revenge. Each word struck harder than the last. At one point she saw Liam at the back of the courtroom, head low, hands clenched. He looked torn, haunted. During a recess, she stepped outside, heart pounding. Reporters swarmed her. Again, but one question froze her in place. "Is it true that Mr. Vale's own son was seen speaking to you privately?" Emma turned sharply toward the voice, realizing what Richard had done. He'd leaked it himself, turning even Liam's kindness into another weapon. She said nothing and walked away, the walls closing in tighter. By the end of the day, the judge postponed the hearing. Emma walked down the courthouse steps, the sky fading into orange dusk. Flashbulbs exploded again, and... She flinched as one reporter shouted, "How does it feel to lose everything?" She didn't answer. She simply whispered to herself, "It's not over." But as she disappeared into the crowd, one pair of eyes followed her from across the street, Liam's. He waited until she was gone, then turned away, determination written across his face. For the first time, he no longer looked like a billionaire's son. He looked like a man ready to fight for the truth. By the time the second court session began, Emma's name was no longer her own. It belonged to headlines, hashtags, and strangers. "Billionaire betrayed by secretary," one paper read. "Inside the scandal at Vale Industries." Her face was everywhere, on news feeds, gossip sites, even late-night talk shows where hosts mocked her betrayal. Every lie spread faster than she could breathe, and her silence was twisted into guilt. She had never felt so small. The courthouse steps, once intimidating, now felt like a stage. Cameras waited like hungry beasts as she approached. "Emma, did you steal the money?" "Are you and Liam Vale having an affair?" The words crashed around her like waves of poison. She kept her head down, gripping her folder tight, the sound of shutters snapping like gunfire in her ears. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than before. Richard Vale sat poised and untouchable, his expression a masterclass in performance. When his lawyer spoke, every word was crafted to slice through Emma's credibility, calling her unstable, obsessive, and vindictive. The judge tried to maintain order, but even in that silence, Emma could feel the room turning against her. She was losing not just her case, but her identity. Her mother sat in the back row, clutching a handkerchief. Emma couldn't bring herself to look at her. She didn't want to see the worry in her mother's eyes, the same look she'd seen as a child, after every scraped knee. This time, there was no bandage that could fix the wound. When the hearing adjourned, Emma walked past the reporters, ignoring their questions, until one voice pierced through. "Do you regret stealing from the man who gave you everything?" She stopped, slowly turned. The world seemed to hold its breath. "He gave me nothing," she said quietly, but her voice carried. "Everything I built there, I earned." Then she walked away before they could twist her words again. The clip went viral within hours. By evening, it was everywhere, cut, edited, and weaponized. Comment sections overflowed with cruelty. She's lying. She's desperate. Gold digger. Each line felt like a bruise she couldn't hide. That night, she lay on her couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to cry anymore. Her phone buzzed with notifications she didn't dare open. Then a new message appeared from an unknown number. You should have kept quiet. Her chest tightened. She deleted it instantly, but the fear lingered like smoke in her lungs. Someone was still watching her. Someone wanted her broken. Across the city, Liam sat alone in his father's mansion. The glow of the TV illuminated Richard's confident smirk as he gave an interview. It's a tragedy, Richard said smoothly, but betrayal must have consequences. Liam turned off the screen, disgust rising in his throat. He'd seen the files, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, but confronting his father now could destroy him too. Still, he couldn't ignore the gnawing guilt any longer. At dinner, the tension finally cracked. Why are you doing this to her? Liam asked, voice low but steady. Richard didn't look up from his meal. Because she crossed me. She's innocent, Liam pressed. Richard's eyes lifted, sharp and glacial. Never question me again. Silence fell like a verdict until Liam pushed back his chair and left, the sound of breaking glass echoing in his wake. That night, Emma sat by her window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. Somewhere out there, Richard slept peacefully, believing he'd won. But she knew better now. Every lie had a seam, every mask a crack. And behind Richard's perfect image, something was rotting. She could feel it, the truth, still alive, still fighting to be seen. As lightning flashed outside, she whispered to herself, "You can take my name, but not my truth." The storm raged louder, as if the sky itself had chosen sides. The following week, Emma disappeared from the noise. No interviews, no public statements, just silence. She spent her days in the city library, hidden between dusty shelves and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The librarians had stopped asking questions. They knew her face from the news, but they also saw the quiet fire in her eyes. Emma wasn't hiding anymore. She was studying, preparing. Stacks of legal books surrounded her like fortresses. She read case after case about wrongful accusations, employee fraud, and digital forgery. Her notebook filled with notes and diagrams, her handwriting more frantic with each passing hour. She had no lawyer, no allies, but she had a mind that refused to surrender. Each page she turned whispered one truth. If she wanted justice, she'd have to carve it herself. Late one evening, she reopened the USB Grace had given her. The flicker of her laptop screen cast long shadows across the table. She traced the strange payments again. Offshore transfers, fake vendors, hidden authorizations. The same pattern repeated. Money moved, erased and moved again. But one thing she hadn't noticed before made her freeze. The transaction stopped abruptly 2 days before she was accused. She zoomed in on the metadata. A new name appeared next to the final edit. Thomas Kane, the CFO, the man who'd stood beside Richard Vail at every press conference, silent and unreadable. Emma's pulse quickened. Why would he stop the transfers right before they blamed me? She whispered. The answer crept in like a chill, because the setup was complete. Determined, she printed the files and circled his name in red ink. The next day, she went to Vail Industries, standing across the street in the cold morning light. Through the tinted glass, she saw executives moving like shadows. Kane wasn't there. She called the company's front desk. "Mr. Kane is unavailable," the receptionist said smoothly. "He's been relocated for international operations." Her stomach dropped. He'd fled. At a nearby cafe, she sat staring at the steam rising from her untouched cup. Grace's words echoed in her head. If Vale finds out, he'll destroy us both. Maybe Kane wasn't acting alone. Maybe he was protecting someone, or being protected. Emma took a deep breath. She'd spent months surviving, now she would start attacking. That night, she began compiling her evidence into a new file. She organized everything by date, transfer, and digital signature. For each forged transaction, she wrote one question beside it. Who benefits? The answer was always the same: Richard Vale. Each line on that spreadsheet wasn't just data, it was proof that her boss had built his empire on lies. Outside, the rain began again, tapping softly against her window like an old friend. She watched the droplets race down the glass and whispered, "You can't outrun the truth forever, Richard." The city lights flickered, reflecting in her tired eyes. Beneath exhaustion, there was something new: resolve. As she shut her laptop, her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time no words, just a single image. Her apartment building, photographed from across the street. She froze. Someone knew exactly where she was. The fear returned, but so did the fire. "If you're watching me," she murmured to the darkness, "then you'll see what happens next." She turned off the lights, heart pounding, and wrote one final note in her journal before sleep took her. "Tomorrow I find him." Liam Vale hadn't slept in days. His father's empire was beginning to feel like a gilded cage, shining on the outside, hollow within. The news kept repeating the same narrative. His father, the hero billionaire betrayed by his loyal secretary. But the more Liam watched, the more the story didn't add up. He remembered the tremor in Emma's voice, the look in her eyes when she said, "Someone framed me." And somewhere deep inside, he believed her. Late one night, he walked through the silent halls of Vale Manor, the air heavy with the smell of oak and wealth. He passed portraits of ancestors, men in suits, women in pearls, all painted with pride and distance. At the end of the hall stood his father's office, its door slightly ajar. Liam hesitated, listening. Inside, the faint hum of a computer. Richard's voice, low, deliberate. "Yes, transfer the rest through the Cayman account. No, don't use the company ledger." Liam froze. His heart pounded so hard he thought the walls could hear it. He waited until the footsteps faded, then slipped inside. The office was immaculate. No dust, no clutter, no warmth. His father's laptop still glowed on the desk, a spreadsheet open. Rows of transactions, figures, offshore codes, the same pattern Emma had described. He swallowed hard and copied the files onto a flash drive. His hands shook, adrenaline coursing through him, but before he could close the laptop, a reflection in the glass caught his eye, his father's shadow in the doorway. "What are you doing here, son?" The voice was calm, too calm. Liam's body went rigid. I needed to print my internship forms," he lied. Richard's eyes narrowed. "At midnight?" He stepped forward, gaze sharp as a blade. "You're not lying to me, are you?" Liam forced a smile. "No, sir." Richard studied him for a long, suffocating moment. Then he chuckled softly and patted Liam's shoulder. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." The hand lingered a moment too long before releasing him. When Richard left, Liam exhaled shakily, the air rushing out of his lungs like a confession. He knew then, his father wasn't just cruel, he was hiding something. The next morning, Liam drove to the outskirts of the city, parking near an empty park. He plugged the flash drive into his tablet and scrolled through the data. The deeper he went, the worse it became. Shell companies, fake charities, and payments under Emma Carter's authorization. It was a perfect illusion, a digital masterpiece of deceit. Every transaction screamed one truth. His father had framed her. He sat there for hours, torn between love and disgust. The man who taught him about loyalty, strength, and legacy was nothing but a fraud. When he finally looked up, the sky was bruised with twilight. "How do you destroy your own father to save the truth?" he whispered. No one answered. Only the wind moved through the trees, carrying his question away. That evening, at the family dinner table, the silence between father and son was a battlefield. Richard spoke of business as usual, mergers, investors, upcoming projects, but Liam heard only the rustle of lies beneath his words. "You look tired, son," Richard said casually. "Long night?" Liam forced a smile. "Just thinking." Richard nodded, his expression unreadable. The table felt colder than ever. After dinner, Liam retreated to his room, locking the door behind him. In his tablet again, and began organizing the files, labeling every piece of evidence. He wasn't ready to confront his father yet, not without a plan. But he also couldn't stand by and watch Emma suffer another day. The truth was bigger than both of them now. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Liam looked out his window at the dark horizon and whispered, "You're right, Emma. The truth doesn't die." But even as he said it, a small red light blinked from the corner of his room, a hidden camera recording everything. Somewhere in the mansion, Richard Vale smiled. The next morning, Liam woke to the sound of his phone buzzing. His eyes still heavy, he reached for it, expecting a message from a friend or work. Instead, one text appeared on the screen, no name, no number. Just 4 words. "Stop digging. He knows." His stomach dropped. The curtains swayed lightly, though the windows were closed. For the first time in his life, the mansion felt like a trap instead of a home. He got dressed quickly, grabbed the flash drive, and slipped out before anyone could notice. The air outside was sharp and cold, the kind that woke up the truth inside you. Every glance over his shoulder felt heavier. He knew his father's influence reached far beyond the walls of Vale Industries, into police stations, newspapers, even the courts. If Richard wanted him silenced, it would happen quietly. Liam's car sped through the downtown streets until he reached a quiet park, the same one where he'd met Emma weeks ago. He spotted her sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree, wrapped in a long coat, eyes lost in thought. She looked thinner, worn, but her presence still carried quiet strength. When she saw him approach, she stood abruptly, uncertain whether to trust him. "I have proof," Liam said, breathless. "Files, transactions, everything." Emma's eyes widened. "You found it?" He nodded, looking around nervously. "But someone knows I did. I think they're watching me." She motioned for him to sit, her voice low. "Calm down. Tell me everything." His hands shook as he handed her the flash drive. "It's all there. Offshore accounts, fake vendors, your name used as cover. My father didn't just accuse you, he used you." Emma stared at the drive as if it were a live wire. "If what you're saying is true," she murmured, "this could destroy him." Liam nodded. "That's what scares me." The wind rustled through the oak leaves above them, scattering golden fragments of light across their faces. "Then we don't have time," Emma said firmly. "We take this to the authorities before he finds out." Liam hesitated. "You don't understand. He owns the authorities. Everyone is on his payroll, even the prosecutors." Emma's jaw tightened. "Then we find someone he doesn't own." Her determination reignited something inside him, a courage he didn't know he had. "You really think we can beat him?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "The truth doesn't need to be stronger, Liam. It just needs to survive." For a moment, silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken trust. But just as Liam reached for his coffee, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "You're both being followed." His blood ran cold. He turned his head slowly toward the street, where a black SUV sat idling. The driver wore dark glasses, his gaze fixed on them. "We have to go," Liam whispered. They hurried away from the park, splitting directions to confuse whoever was watching. Emma ducked into a crowded subway station, her heart hammering as she clutched the flash drive to her chest. Liam took the back alley toward his car, but before he could unlock it, a man stepped out of the shadows. "Your father wants to talk," the man said smoothly, blocking his path. Liam froze. "Tell him I'll call," he replied, voice steady. The man's smirk didn't reach. His eyes, "I think he prefers now." For a moment the world went quiet. Just the hum of the city, the distant siren of a police car, and the thudding of Liam's heart. He took a step back, then another. The man didn't move. "Tell him," Liam said again. "He'll hear from me when I'm ready." Then he turned and ran. Meanwhile, Emma surfaced from the subway onto a different street, lungs burning. She ducked into a bookstore, hiding between aisles, trying to slow her breath. The world outside kept moving, cars, people, life. But somewhere beneath it all, a war had begun. 2 people against a billion-dollar lie. And in an office high above the city, Richard Vale stared at his phone, a message lighting up the screen. They met. His hand clenched slowly into a fist. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her phone buzzing again. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was Liam. His voice was tense, urgent. "Meet me downtown at the old pier. I found something new." Her pulse quickened. "Is it safe?" "For now," he said, "but we don't have long." She grabbed her coat, slipped the flash drive into her bag, and stepped into the cold morning air. The city seemed to hold its breath. When she arrived, the pier was nearly empty. The water slapped softly against the wooden posts, grey under the cloudy sky. Liam stood at the edge, his expression strained. "I checked the metadata again," he said, holding up his tablet. "Every illegal transfer was approved under your name. But here's what's strange. My father signed off the day before each one, under a proxy code." Emma frowned. "So he knew. He authorized it all." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. "And there's more. The last transfer went straight into an account under Thomas Kane's wife's name. That's why Kane ran." The pieces began to click into place. "Richard used Kane as a front," Emma whispered, "and when the trail got too close to him, he sacrificed me." Her chest ached with both fury and relief. For the first time, the truth had a face. But as they stood there, a sharp sound cut through the wind, the echo of footsteps. Emma turned just in time to see 2 men in black coats approaching from the far end of the pier. Liam's voice dropped. "We have to go." He grabbed her arm, leading her toward the exit. But it was too late. The men spread out, blocking their path. "Miss Carter," one said calmly, "Mr. Vale would like his property back." Emma clutched her bag tighter. "Tell him he'll get it in court," she said. The man smiled. "I don't think you'll make it to court." Before he could move closer, Liam stepped between them. "You'll have to go through me first." There was a flicker of hesitation, just enough time for Emma to run. Liam turned, shouting, "Go!" as the men lunged. The sound of struggle filled the air. She ran until her lungs screamed. She didn't stop until she reached the street, diving into a passing taxi. "Drive!" she gasped. The driver hesitated. "Where to?" "Anywhere, just go." The car sped off, leaving the pier behind. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, waiting for it to ring. 10 minutes passed. 15. No word from Liam. Fear clawed at her chest. Then her screen lit up. A new headline: "Anonymous leak, Vale scandal or setup." Emma's heart froze. Someone had leaked their investigation online. The documents, the transfers, everything. But the article twisted the narrative, claiming Emma and Liam had worked together to blackmail Richard Vale. Photos of them at the park flashed across the news. The truth had been weaponized. "No," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "No, this isn't possible." Her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I warned you to stop. You made him choose. Then, attached beneath the text, a photo of Liam, bruised, sitting in the back of a car. Emma's scream was silent, caught in her throat. Betrayal had arrived, not from a stranger, but from the man she'd trusted to save them both. Somewhere, Richard had turned his son into a prisoner of his own blood. Across the city, Richard watched the chaos unfold on television, a glass of whiskey in hand. "You see, Emma," he murmured, voice like ice, "truth is just another story, and I control the ending." His reflection in the window smiled back at him, sharp and hollow. But even then, deep in the chaos, the truth was already spreading, faster, wilder, unstoppable, and Richard Vale had no idea that his empire was about to start bleeding from the inside. The courthouse looked different this time, colder, bigger, almost alive with whispers. Reporters filled the marble steps, cameras flashing like lightning as Emma walked through the crowd. The leaked files had made her infamous again. Some called her a hero, others a manipulator. But none of that mattered now. This was her final hearing, the day she would either reclaim her life or lose it forever. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Richard Vale sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculate as always, his legal team surrounding him like armor. Across from him, Emma stood alone, her folder pressed against her chest. The judge entered, and silence fell like a curtain. "This is the continuation of Vale versus Carter," the clerk announced. The words felt like chains wrapping around her name. Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but grew steadier with every word. "Your Honor," she said, "I don't have the resources or power my accuser has, but I do have evidence and the truth." Murmurs rippled through the audience. She laid the flash drive on the table, the same one that had nearly cost her life. "These files show forged signatures, hidden accounts, and a pattern of theft that points directly to Mr. Vale." Richard's lawyer rose instantly. "Objection. This data was obtained illegally through unauthorized access." The judge raised a hand. "I'll decide what's admissible," Emma continued, her tone now unshakable. "He framed me to hide his crimes. His own CFO, Thomas Kane, vanished right after the last transfer. I believe Mr. Vale paid him to disappear." Richard leaned back in his chair, smirking faintly, as if watching a child tell ghost stories. Then came the laughter, quiet at first, from Richard's lawyers. "Your Honor," one said, "this is a performance. There is no proof that these documents are genuine." Emma's stomach twisted, but she refused to falter. "I can prove they weren't written by me," she said. "Every file contains digital fingerprints, timestamps, authorization codes, all linked to Vale's personal network." The lawyer opened his mouth again, but the judge cut him off. "Let her finish." Emma looked at Richard then, really looked at him. "You called me a thief. You took my career, my name, my peace, but I'm not the one who built an empire on stolen trust." For the first time, Richard's jaw tightened. He whispered something to his attorney, his mask beginning to crack. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have the technical evidence to support these claims, Miss Carter?" Her heart sank. "Not all of it. Not yet." A ripple of mockery swept the room. The opposing counsel smirked. "Then this is nothing but fiction." The judge sighed, closing his notes. "Without verified evidence, I'm afraid." But before he could finish, the heavy courtroom doors swung open. Gasps echoed through the gallery as Liam Vale entered, bruised but standing tall, a folder clutched in his hand. "Your Honor," he said, voice rough but clear, "I have the missing proof." Every head turned. Richard's face drained of color. "Liam," he hissed under his breath, "what are you doing?" His son didn't answer. He walked straight to the judge's bench, handing over the folder marked "Confidential." These are company audit logs, unaltered. They show who authorized every illegal transfer. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the pages. Richard's lawyers froze, their confidence evaporating. Emma's heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Liam turned toward her, meeting her eyes for the first time since the pier. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," he said softly. "You were right from the beginning." For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Richard's hand trembled, gripping the edge of the table. His empire, his illusion, was starting to crumble. And as the judge called for recess to verify the evidence, Richard finally looked at his son and whispered, "You've destroyed us." Liam's voice was steady. "No, Dad. You destroyed yourself." When the judge returned to the courtroom, the air had shifted. Reporters whispered to each other in feverish anticipation, cameras subtly turning on despite the no recording rule. Emma sat rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. Liam stood beside her now, calm but pale. Across the room, Richard Vale's lawyers looked like soldiers realizing their fortress was already burning. "Court is in session," the judge said evenly. "Mr. Vale, we have reviewed the documents." The judge's tone cut through the silence. "These files contain undeniable proof that the financial discrepancies originated from your accounts, not Miss Carter's. The logs trace back to your personal authorization ID, Mr. Vale." Richard's jaw clenched. "That's impossible," he said quickly. "My son must have fabricated them. He's confused." Liam stepped forward, his voice firm. "I didn't fabricate anything. I found them on your hidden server, the one you told Thomas Kane to erase." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Richard's face hardened. "Liam," he warned, his voice low, "you don't know what you're saying." But Liam's voice only grew louder. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I watched you ruin an innocent woman to protect yourself. I watched you turn every lie into gold, every betrayal into strategy. And I'm done being your silence." His words struck like thunder, echoing in the marble chamber. Richard stood abruptly. "Enough!" His voice thundered, his mask cracking in front of everyone. "Everything I did was to protect this company, our family name." The judge's gavel hit the desk once. "Sit down, Mr. Vale." But Richard couldn't stop. His fury boiled over. "You think I'd let years of work collapse because of one woman's mistake?" He turned toward Emma, venom in his eyes. "You were a pawn, Emma. That's all you ever were." Emma rose slowly, trembling but resolute. "Then why did you have to forge my name?" she asked softly. The words silenced the room. Richard froze, his breath hitching. For a moment he looked lost, exposed under the weight of his own arrogance. Liam stared at him, heart breaking but unflinching. "You framed her, Dad," he said, voice cracking. "You knew it, and you let me believe her guilt because it was convenient." The judge turned to Richard. "Mr. Vale, do you deny authorizing the false transactions?" Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His silence was louder than any confession. The audience murmured, phones lifting to record the billionaire's downfall. Richard sank back into his chair, his confidence crumbling. The judge nodded gravely. "Then this court will proceed with formal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and defamation." Emma's breath left her in a single shaking exhale. It was over, or at least it had begun to be. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Liam turned toward her. "You're free now," he whispered. She shook her head. "No, Liam. I'm finally seen." Their exchange drew quiet smiles from those watching, even as Richard buried his face in his hands. Outside the courthouse, the media storm erupted again. But this time, Emma's name carried a different weight. "Whistleblower secretary exposes corporate fraud. Son testifies against billionaire father." The world finally saw her for who she was, the woman who refused to bow to power. Flashbulbs blinded her as she stepped out into the light, Liam close beside her. When asked for a statement, she paused, looking directly into the cameras. "The truth doesn't belong to the powerful," she said. "It belongs to the brave." Then she turned and walked down the steps, her head held high. Behind her, Richard Vale was escorted away in silence, his empire collapsing under the same truth he tried to bury. As she and Liam reached the bottom of the stairs, he whispered, "He'll hate me forever." Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe, but someday he'll remember what you did and call it courage." The two of them stood there side by side, the world watching, not a billionaire and a secretary, but two people who had chosen truth over fear. The morning after the verdict, the world seemed to awaken to a different skyline. The towering Vale Industries building still stood, but its logo now hung like a hollow symbol, a monument of deceit. Reporters swarmed the entrance as employees. They filed out, holding boxes and stunned expressions. Inside, auditors moved like silent ghosts through the marble halls, seizing files, servers, and the last fragments of Richard Vale's empire. Emma stood across the street, watching it all unfold. She felt no joy, no vengeance, only the deep, quiet ache that comes after a storm. 12 years of her life had been built in that building. 12 years of loyalty, of trust, of believing in something that never truly existed. Now all that remained was rubble made of lies and the faint hum of justice doing its work. She glanced at her reflection in a nearby window. Tired eyes, a faint scar near her temple, and a woman who looked nothing like the secretary she once was. For the first time, she didn't feel small standing before that skyscraper. She felt free. A gust of wind tugged at her coat as if urging her to walk away, but she couldn't. Not yet. Some part of her needed to see the end with her own eyes. Behind the glass doors, Richard Vale sat in his office for the last time. The man who once commanded cities now looked like a shadow of himself. His lawyers had abandoned him, his board had resigned, and the empire he built on intimidation was dissolving one press conference at a time. He stared out at the street and saw Emma standing there. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. Neither moved. Liam entered quietly, holding a folder. "It's over," he said softly. Richard didn't answer. His reflection stared back at him, unrecognizable. "You did this," he whispered. Liam swallowed hard. "No, Dad, you did." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Richard finally turned away, shoulders slumped under the weight of his own creation collapsing. Outside, Emma received a call from the prosecutor's office. They thanked her for her courage, promised restitution, and mentioned that Thomas Kane had been located abroad, ready to testify. She listened, but her thoughts drifted elsewhere. Justice, she realized, wasn't clean or satisfying. It was heavy, messy, and carved from pain. Still, it was real, and real was enough. That evening, she walked by the courthouse again. News crews were still camped outside, lights cutting through the twilight. A reporter approached her for a statement, but she simply said, "The truth always costs something. I just didn't know it would cost this much." Her voice was calm, almost tender. She turned away before they could ask more questions. Meanwhile, at the Vale mansion, Liam packed his bags. The house that once echoed with power now felt empty. He paused by a family portrait, his father, his late mother, and a boy who still believed money could fix everything. He placed the frame face down and walked out without looking back. For the first time, his life was his own. Later that night, Emma and Liam met at a small diner near the river. Neutral ground, away from the chaos. They sat in silence for a while, the neon sign outside flickering above them. "So," Emma finally said, "what happens now?" Liam exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but I think maybe this is where we start over." She smiled faintly. "Then let's start." As they left, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement, stretching long and uncertain into the dark. Somewhere behind them, the empire of lies lay in ruins, and ahead, the fragile beginnings of something honest waited to be built. 2 weeks later, the world watched as the State versus Richard Vale began. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, and news anchors called it the trial of the decade. Once a titan of finance, Richard now entered the courtroom in a grey suit that no longer fit, the arrogance stripped from his face. The same walls where he once sat in control now enclosed him as the accused. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Emma. She sat quietly among the witnesses, her heart steady but heavy. Every flash of the cameras, every murmur from the crowd reminded her how public this war had become, but she didn't care about the headlines anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth having the final word. And today, it would speak for itself. When the judge called the session to order, Richard's defense tried to paint him as a man misunderstood, a visionary who made reckless mistakes. But the prosecution had come prepared. They displayed transaction logs, digital authorizations, and testimony from Thomas Kane himself, who appeared via video call. His confession was cold, detailed, and damning. Every instruction, Kane said, came directly from Richard Vale. The room went silent. Even Richard's lawyers seemed to deflate. Emma watched him closely. The man who once ruled with intimidation now looked small, his shoulders curled inward. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I built this company from nothing," he said. "I gave people jobs, homes, everything." The judge leaned forward. "And in doing so, you destroyed others." The gavel's echo rang through the room like judgment itself. Then came the moment no one expected. Richard turned his eyes toward Emma. "You think this makes you better than me?" he asked, his tone breaking between anger and despair. Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any accusation. He lowered his gaze, realizing she had already won. Not in power, but in peace. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, defamation. The courtroom erupted in a storm of noise, reporters scrambling, spectators whispering, lawyers shouting over one another. But amid the chaos, Emma felt only stillness. Justice wasn't thunder or applause. It was quiet, clear, and final. As the bailiffs led Richard away, Liam stepped out from the corridor, watching in silence. His father paused briefly when their eyes met. For the first time in years, there was no anger, only regret. "I was wrong," Richard muttered, barely audible. Liam nodded. "I know." And then the guards took him, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. Outside, the sunlight cut through the clouds for the first time in weeks. Reporters surrounded Emma again, microphones raised. "Do you have anything to say now that justice has been served?" She thought for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Justice isn't about winning," she said. "It's about surviving long enough to be heard." Cameras flashed as she turned away, walking into the light. Later that evening, she visited the riverfront alone. The water shimmered gold beneath the sunset. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed faintly, but the world around her felt calm. She closed her eyes and whispered, "It's over." The wind carried her words away, soft and sure. Behind her, Liam approached quietly. "You did it," he said. Emma shook her head. For the first time, they both smiled, not out of joy, but relief. The kind that comes only when the truth finally breathes free. Months passed, and the chaos faded into memory. The newspapers had long since found new scandals, new villains, new stories to devour. For Emma Carter, life finally began to slow down. She moved into a small apartment overlooking the river, nothing fancy, but peaceful. Each morning, she'd sit by the window with her coffee, watching the sunlight dance on the water. For the first time in years, her heart didn't race when the phone rang. She started a small consulting firm, helping employees who had been wrongfully accused or mistreated. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. Each case she took reminded her of the woman she used to be, the one who thought the world would never believe her. Now she gave that belief to others. Her name, once synonymous with scandal, had become a symbol of integrity. It was the quiet redemption she never thought she'd find. Liam visited often, though less than before. He was rebuilding too, studying law, working with organizations that fought corporate corruption. He'd cut ties with his father's empire completely. When he came by, they would talk for hours, not about the past, but about the kind of future they wanted to build. Between them was a bond forged in truth, tempered by pain. One rainy afternoon, he brought her a small gift, a framed photo of the river, taken the day of the verdict. "It reminds me of peace," he said. She smiled. "It reminds me of survival." They didn't need to say more. The silence between them had changed, no longer heavy, just full of things understood. Sometimes Emma still dreamed of the old office, the smell of fresh coffee, the echo of Richard's voice, the sound of her name spoken in anger. But when she woke, she no longer felt fear. She would breathe, stretch, and remind herself, that chapter's over. Healing, she learned, wasn't forgetting. It was remembering without breaking. Richard Vale remained in prison. His empire was gone, his name stripped from the skyline. Yet Emma didn't hate him. She pitied him, a man who'd traded peace for power, only to lose both. When the papers reported that he'd requested a reduced sentence for good behavior, Emma simply folded the page and set it aside. Some things didn't need her attention anymore. One evening, she walked along the pier where it had all begun, the wind cool, the water calm. The same wooden boards creaked beneath her feet, but the fear that once haunted her was gone. She thought of Grace, of Cain, of the people who'd vanished when the truth was inconvenient. Then she smiled softly. The truth hadn't vanished, it had survived through her. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon gold. Liam joined her, hands in his pockets. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into that courtroom?" he asked. She looked at him and said, "Then maybe someone else would have. Because the truth doesn't depend on who speaks it, only that someone does." They stood in silence as the city lights flickered to life behind them. Emma turned toward the camera of her life, the audience that had followed every chapter, and said softly, as if speaking to them, "If you've ever been silenced, doubted, or blamed for something you didn't do, don't give up. Truth might walk slowly, but it never stops walking." She smiled once more, the wind catching her hair as the screen faded to black. And maybe that's what this story was really about. Not billionaires or scandals, but truth. The kind of truth that refuses to die, even when the world tries to bury it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't fight louder. It's stand quietly and never let go of what's right. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the moments when you had to stand alone, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this one, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? Your voice matters here, because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that the truth, your truth, still has power. Until the next story, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in justice.